What is the most important nut, bolt or connector on your Harley Davidson motorcycle? Let's get into it.
Revelator Alpha.
Hello, welcome to Revelator Alpha. I hope you're all well. So this video is a kind of a question to you all. You got your Harley Davidson, or let's say any other motorcycle. Let's say you got your Harley Davidson in this case, because that's what I ride, Harley Davidson Sport Glide, as you know. Now, in my mind, I know there's one component, one part, one nut, one bolt, one connector on that bike that for me is the most important one. And I almost came a cropper of it, let's say last year. And I didn't tell anybody, kept it to myself. I thought, oh, best not tell anybody about that one. But I thought, you know what? I think it's about time that we talked about this particular connector. Now, which do you think it is? Now, many of you might think, well, the most important thing on a motorcycle of any description is the brakes. Yeah, you really got to have good brakes, haven't you? Especially if you want to go fast and you need that stopping power. But even if you want to go slow, you still need stopping power. But for me, brakes are not the most important. They're not the most vital. They're not the most important thing on a motorcycle or any vehicle. So what else? Now, I suppose we could talk about suspension. Yeah, suspension is a really important part on a motorcycle. Tires, absolutely. Wheels, drivetrain, any part of the engine. Yeah, that's really important. Electrics, electronics, battery. Yeah, it's all important stuff because every component on a motorcycle is going to have a function. So if it's there, then it serves a purpose. You need it on there. Unless you're going to start chopping things off and make it into a bobber, of course, then you don't need all that stuff. But that's another discussion. So what am I talking about? Right. So for me, the most important thing is actually not when you're riding. Your riding motorcycle, as it were, the components that make it continue to ride or continue to ride smoothly or enable you to stop, as in braking, enable you to steer, let's say the handlebars, you know, that kind of thing. That's all when you've got the bike going. So there's, you know, you're going to be paying attention, you're going to be monitoring all those things all the time. But one thing that you probably don't monitor is how you get that bike started in the first place. Haha, a light bulb moment. Yes, apologies for the wind noise if you're getting it. It's very windy. So if it's not about riding the bike and it's not about stopping the bike, then it's just about starting the bike. So what am I talking about? Okay, so a couple of years ago I did videos on removal of the tank on the M8 Softails and how you should do it and what you should look for and all that kind of stuff. So I was doing some work to my bike, let's say last year sometime, and I had to take the tank off. Great, no problem. So I took the tank off, and when I reconnected it, the bike wouldn't start. Oh crikey, what had I done? And then I could smell some petrol. Oh crikey, what have I done there? So I looked underneath and I hadn't connected the quick disconnect properly. Let me show you. So it's basically that connector there. There's an outer sleeve that pulls out and this fuel tap pulls out there. Right, hopefully you could see that. It's amazing. The wind just seems to be blowing down this channel now. Oh. Yes, so that was me being a bit of a fool. So by me not connecting it properly, I was getting starved of fuel basically, and it just wouldn't start. What I'd also done was create a fire risk, and that's not good. Now, I bring this up because I had heard in subsequent months that there had been a few fires or motorcycle fires, not with Harley Davidsons, I hasten to add, and not with the Softails. This is not a doom and gloom negative, you know, let's rail on Harley Davidson video. No, nothing like that at all. This is purely that I'd heard of a couple of motorcycle fires, and I kind of got thinking about the time that obviously I was leaking fuel all over my my engine. Whilst it wasn't hot, there we go, leaking fuel is never a good thing. But then I also thought of the times, well, how many times you go to a petrol station, to a garage, and you fill up and you spill a bit of fuel, you know, you overfill the tank, it goes all over the place, and maybe it drips on a hot exhaust. I very rarely, I don't think I've ever heard of a fire being caused by that fuel dripping on an exhaust. I could be wrong, but you know, I'm sure it must have happened. I'm sure it happens quite a lot. I mean, I know we kind of try and pay attention to that, you know, a lot, but it must happen, because especially as fuel is so volatile, gas, you know, petrol is so volatile, that you would have thought it would happen a lot more. So for me, the most important connector on the motorcycle is that connector from the fuel tank that's delivering fuel or allowing fuel to flow into your carburetor, into your induction module, your injectors, whatever it is, whatever system you've got on your bike. Okay, so that connector, that fuel tap, that's the most important one for me, because it allows you to start the engine because you've got fuel going through it, but also if it's leaking, you're creating a fire risk. Now, obviously, I do appreciate that every other component on the bike is really important, but I thought actually this is something that Softail owners or Harley Davidson or tourers or any person who's riding a motorcycle and they have to remove the tank, make sure that when you're reinstalling the tank, that your connections, your fuel lines, let's say in this case, are correct, are proper, and they're not leaking fuel. Check your fuel hoses on a regular basis. Any time you are doing work on the bike, just check for the condition of those and make sure you're not getting any leaks. I remember working on older bikes, or even on my latest project build, I was just checking the fuel lines, and I thought, you know what, I have to change a couple of the fuel lines here because they were just worn, they were hard, they were brittle. I thought, you know what, let me just change these out. So looking at, especially when you're talking about older bikes, checking those fuel lines, those fuel hoses, making sure the connectors are there, make sure there's no fuel leaks, all that kind of stuff, that always to me seems like, well, yeah, you want that to obviously make the engine run, to make it start, but also you don't want any leaks, so you know, any risk of fire. But as I say, you know, I've rarely heard of motorcycle fires being caused by leaking fuel or spilt fuel. Now, I know it has happened, but I really can't think of many instances where people have dripped fuel onto a hot exhaust or a hot engine, let's say, when they've been filling up a gas station, and then, you know, it bursts into flames. I mean, you have all the conditions there. You have fuel, you have oxygen, and you have heat. So perhaps there's just not enough heat to cause a fire, but who knows? But anyway, let us know your thoughts on this. What is the most important connector, nut, bolt on your motorcycle, on your Harley Davidson, Suzuki, Kawasaki, whatever it is? You know, do you have a Jesus nut on there? And if you don't know what a Jesus nut is, well, basically any nut that suddenly breaks or gives way, you're going to go, oh Jesus, help me. You know, that's what a Jesus nut is. But do you have one of those? Now, I'm sure there are lots of fasteners, nuts, bolts on a bike that kind of have that level of importance, of course. But for me, that fuel tap, that fuel connection is a really important one. Gets fuel to the engine to start it, of course, but if you don't get it right and it's dripping fuel, well, it's not going to end well, is it? Don't forget to subscribe, hit that bell, like and share. Check out the website revelatoralf.com. Let us know your thoughts below. Ta-da!